All right. Good evening and welcome to everybody who has logged in to watch us at home. Tonight we're discussing osseointegration. My name is Bryn Jones. I'm an Orthotics Prosthetics of Canada certified prosthetist and orthotist, and I work out of St. Catharines, which is in Ontario and in the Niagara region. So I'll be hosting. Oh, I hear feedback on every. I'll be hosting this evening, and we'll be discussing the topic of osseointegration as it pertains to lower extremity patients in the amputee population. So how did we get here? My first experience with osseointegration was about 3 years ago when we had a client come into our clinic and she already had it. At that point, we decided as a group, you know what, we need to get on board and figure out knowledge, experience, and what we can do to better aid this population, because at that point we realized people are going to get this done with or without our knowledge. So at that point, we decided to do was, a colleague and myself, we decided about 2 years ago to travel to Australia, and we visited the Osseointegration group of Australia. It was a fantastic week where we got to spend time with on the ground floor watching surgeries happen with Dr. Almeire's. We got to meet the prosthetist and the physiotherapists and talk to a ton of clients to figure out what they thought of the system and was it beneficial. Since then, we've offered pre and post support to 10 amputees in the area who've either undergone or are about to undergo the surgery in 2019. We also traveled to Montreal. There's a group in Montreal there doing the osseointegration surgery. Another fantastic experience meeting the crew there. And we refer quite a few patients there now because it's on home soil. Other than that, we've hosted 2 evenings of osseointegration info nights. One was in 2017 in Niagara to clinic care personnel and to potential clients, just to start the topic of talking about osseointegration. We also held one in Peterborough in 2018, which also went very well. And since these things have gone well and the conversation started, we decided that a night like tonight would be beneficial. So the idea of tonight was to get together with a panel of some current osseointegration users and some people who are seeking the surgery to talk about the process of transitioning from a transitional or a traditional prosthetic socket to the osseointegration system. So some people have had it done and some people are on the journey of trying to get done. And this is meant to be informal. I have a colleague who is monitoring the broadcast right now. You are able to ask questions as we go along here. Those questions will be filtered to me and we can ask the panel. And there is a question and answer period at the end. So some questions may be saved to the end, but if you have a question, feel free to write in and ask, because we may just interject because it might be a topic that we're on at that time. So with that all being said, I'd like to introduce the panel that we have here today. Actually, I'm going to introduce them, but then I'm going to have them introduce themselves in terms of who they are and where they are along in their journey. So we have John, Peggy, Sean, and Pete. And go ahead, John. Tell us a little bit about yourself.
Okay. Hi, my name is John. My amputation happened on July the 25th, 1993, when my left leg was ripped off in a farm accident. In September of 1993, that's where I got my socket-based prosthetic. So I've been using a socket-based prosthetic for 25 years now. And in fact, it worked quite well for the first about 20 years. And I did quite well with it. And in fact, in 2015, when I was 62 years old, I biked across Canada with my daughter, Sarah. And we did over 8,000 kilometers on our bicycles, and we were camping most of the way. So a socket-based system is quite good, but at the same time, starting about 5 years ago, I started to have a lot of pain in my left stump, and I had a lot of skin issues starting to develop. So it became more and more difficult to get a good fit with my socket. So when I heard about osseointegration, I wanted to pursue it right away. And I see it as a way that I can continue walking and bicycling for the next 20 years. So I'm pursuing it, and I hope to have the operation on April the 12th in Montreal.
Okay. Thank you, John. All right, Peggy.
Hi, my name is Peggy Humber, and I have been an amputee for about 5.5 years. My amputation was a trauma-induced. It wasn't a health concern. So Niagara Prosthetic has always been my leg guys since day one when Alan Rigby visited me in the trauma unit in 2012. My socket from Niagara Prosthetic had evolved in something I could manage. What frustrated me was the start of my back problems, and this was due primarily to my bad posture and poor walking gait. I had a genium prosthetic, so it wasn't the fault of the prosthetic that was the problem. It was the interface to my body. So initially I investigated other options, and I stumbled upon the procedure not yet available in Canada in 2016. At one point I asked Alan Rigby and the crew from Niagara Prosthetic about osseointegration, and the answer that Alan always seemed to give me was, Peggy, you will see this procedure in your lifetime for a limb replacement. I set out and requested some emails to the osseointegration groups within the world, and only 3 places replied back. I was invited to the Amputee Coalition show in 2006. At the ACC show, I had a quick meeting with Dr. Manjed Almadiris of Australia Osseointegration Group, and he determined that my limb was a good candidate for the procedure. So I left Canada on October 26, 2016, landed in Sydney for my surgery, had the surgery early morning, November 2nd, 2016, stayed in hospital for about 5 days, discharged to follow up with physio appointments. I returned to Canada after 28 days with doctor orders to walk lightly until we had good bone adhesion to the implant. So after March 1st, 2017, I have been crutch-free, pain-free, and I have been a huge advocate of osseointegration along with the Niagara crew. I asked Alan why he embraced this technology when so many other clinics felt threatened by it, and his answer to me was, because it gives us another tool in our toolbox to offer to our patients. So that just says abundant of knowledge that these guys have accumulated to service their customer better.
Thanks, Peggy. Okay, Sean. Sure.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen of the internet. My name is Sean Fowler. I've been an amputee 14 going on 15 years now, a traditional socket user for 13 of those years. Myself personally, it's been a bit of a road when it comes to socket systems. I've tried every type that's come my way, from traditional suction, which I find works the best, to seal-in liners, to pin liners, to socket and lanyard-based systems. So I've run the gamut with them, and I've had minor and manageable successes with the majority of these systems. But similar to what John is saying is it's starting to take an effect on my body. I've already had to have 3 redundant tissue surgeries on my leg in order to groom it into shape for so that it would be able to be used with a socket. And this seems to be like it would cause or take away a lot of the causes and stresses of having a socket, such as sweating, chafing, volume change, all these types of things. But I'm sure we'll be able to touch on that soon enough. So I'm just going to pass the mic over to Pete.
Thanks, Sean. Pete?
Hi, my name's Pete Tucker. My amputation happened during a motorcycle accident on June 26, 2014. I was operating a motorcycle in a police motorcycle escort, and believe it or not, a goose collided with my head, knocked me unconscious, and the steel guardrail severed my leg at the scene above the knee, my left leg, which is why I have this cute little scar here on my face. It upsets my wife when I point out my scar as opposed to my leg for my injuries, but So my accident, like I said, was June 26, 2014. I had many issues besides losing my leg that were a medical threat to me at the time. But Alan Rigby came to see me in the hospital. We both live in St. Catharines. That's where Niagara Prosthetics is. Alan Rigby came to see me in the hospital, and I wasn't completely healed yet, mentally or physically. And I remember him telling me at the time that he could take care of me and he would do his best to make me better. So I got seeing Bryn and Alan at the prosthetics, Niagara Prosthetics, and they both set me up in a traditional socket system, which they set me up so well in the socket system that I was able to return to full duties in full uniform with no accommodations at all and go back to police work. But like Sean said, I personally went through some skin issues, some volume issues, a little bit of blistering, a little bit of not fitting properly. I did not know that osseointegration was an option, and I truly thought at the time that these guys did a great job to get me back to where I was, and that these were just little problems that I would have to deal with. However, as Bryn said, in 2017, they had a osseointegration meet and greet information session at Niagara Prosthetics, and I went to it. And I met some Americans, as well as Peggy, who'd been to Australia and had it done, and I was captivated and interested by what they said they could do and what this surgery might bring to me. And in all honesty, I'm just being honest when I say this, I didn't really think it was ever going to happen. It's kind of like playing the lottery, and you're never really going to win the $1 million. Bryn and Alan were happy about the OI surgery. My wife was thrilled about the OI surgery. And I was happy that it existed, but again, it was so distant in my mind that I didn't really know what was going to happen. So that was 2017. And then in 2018, I got a call from WSIB, which is my insurance provider, from getting hurt at work, that said I could go to Montreal on October 3rd, 2018, and have the surgery with Dr. Turcotte, who I think Bryn and Alan met in Australia as well. So I had my surgery October 3rd in Montreal. I got out of the hospital in Montreal November 1st. I came back home to St. Catharines. And because the doctor and my wife said so, I couldn't go back to work till January 16th of 2019. However, I think I could have gone back to work December 16th. So I waited till January 16th, 2019, which is only 3 months after my surgery, and I went back to full duties on the road again. The OI for me is a life-changing event. I knew it was good. I was told it would be good, but you don't know it's good until you get it. And I would just say that if you have the opportunity to get it, I fully back it. My experience has been fantastic. I am as close to being the old me as I can ever get, and I'm happy with that.
Thank you, Pete. Great. So that's our panel: John, Peggy, Sean, and Pete. So, and from that, just to reiterate, John, you're in the process. You have a date for the surgery. Peggy has osseointegration surgery. Has had it over 2 years now. Sean, you've been to Montreal to be through the system to be approved, correct? But still waiting on anything. 8 hours in the process. You're 8 hours in the process. And Pete, you had the surgery last year.
October 2018,
Yes.
yes.
Okay. So we're going to jump into some questions for the panel, just for open discussion. Before we do so, just want to discuss funding, because it's the first question that comes up when people come into the clinic. They say, how much? How much? So we're not going to talk about numbers, because it's not our place to say. If for anybody who is interested in that, feel free to contact us. We have information at the end of the broadcast on how to get a hold of us, and we can direct you to the proper channels, whether Australia, Montreal, to look into those things. And we'll go from there, because there are many factors involved that we don't control and aren't for us to say. So, okay. So now we want to talk about the osteo process. So I know, Pete, you just talked, but you're up again.
Okay.
So what I'd like to know, or what I think people would like to know, is just give us a brief overview of start to finish, and in brief, kind of like from where you started to where you ended up. What was that kind of timeline?
I think my timeline is a little bit more unique, and this sounds kind of ironic for me to say, being a guy who lost his leg in a traumatic accident, but I'm actually kind of a lucky guy. I'm a very lucky guy. The accident itself was traumatic. It turned my life upside down, but between Bryn and Alan and my wife and my kids and WSIB Insurance, which takes care of me in Ontario, my life got completely turned around. I know in my personal experience that my surgery was paid for by my insurance company, and I am very, very grateful for that. And I realize I have an advantage that a lot of people don't necessarily have. However, I would like to tell you that no matter what the surgery costs, it's worth doing. You are going to like the results. I would have sold my house now to get the results that I have without knowing it. So I can simply tell you, if money is a concern and you're not sure what to do, I guarantee you it's worth it. And my process was 2017, I forget what month, but 2017, I went to a Niagara Prosthetics and Orthotics information session on osseointegration. And I'm a little embarrassed to say that I actually don't know how I got the osseo. Bryn and Alan were excellent. My wife did a lot of digging. And all of a sudden, I just got this great gift of a phone call that said I could go and get it done. So I am a little embarrassed that I'm not quite sure how I got it done, but I appreciate my position, that people looked out for me. I qualified, and basically, before I knew it, boom, I was off to Montreal. And I was a little scared at first, of the surgery and physically how it would look to me when I was done. But all those apprehensions disappeared when I woke up literally 4 hours after the surgery and started to realize what it was bringing me. And 3 weeks later, I was walking, and it far surpassed anything that I could have imagined that it would be. It was absolutely life-changing, brought me back to where I am today.
So from the time you had the surgery till active duty, how long was that?
Surgery was October 3rd. The first time I started walking with a prosthetic, because we had to wait for the bone to heal, was October 21st. I got out of the hospital in Montreal November 1st after doing physio and everything they wanted me to do. I came home to Ontario November 1st. And like I said, I could have gone right back to work, but my wife and the doctors said, no, let that femur heal. So January 16th of this year, 2019, I went back to work. So we're talking 3 months and 2 weeks from the day of surgery, I went back to work. Full duties, no accommodations, my own car, full uniform. And I think I could have gone back sooner. That's how quick the turnaround
So
was.
Peggy, my question then, I turn to you, because Pete went through the Montreal experience. You did your surgery in Australia. Was your timeline similar, or?
I had a lot more pre-operation procedure. I was one of the fortunate ones that was granted some funding for my surgery. Granted, I had to do a huge report that, again, the crew from Niagara Prosthetics helped me greatly, and he did a cost study to say, if you support this woman till she's 75 or 80, this is the cost it's going to cost ADP to support this woman. Or you did a cost comparison on osseointegration, and osseointegration is the cheaper route to go. So I submitted my report August 1st to Ontario Health, and mid-October I got my letter back saying I was getting some funding. I had already approached my bank on financing to help with the surgery, because I saw the huge advantage of the surgery So when I stepped on that plane to go to Australia, I had already known in my head that my surgery was going to be partially funded. So I arrived in Australia. I went for pre-op the Friday, stayed the weekend, and then Monday morning I did some more pre-op, and Wednesday had my surgery. 5 days I went in hospital. On the third day, they already had me loading the bone on the abutment. They have you sitting on a scale or standing on a scale and pushing on a scale on the other side up to 5 kilograms. And each day you keep increasing the weight.
That's the loading protocol. Yeah.
And after 28 days, I was discharged from Australia. They gave me a lighter weight leg because my femur is only 23 centimeters long. I have a very short femur. So Munjed actually had to split the bottom part of my femur to put the implant in. And because it's so short, he was worried about the torquing of it. So I have additional 2 screws up into my hip joint to stop the torsion. So for 3 months after I came back, I had to have a lightweight leg. So I walked around with crutches till March 1st. I had a x-ray taken, sent it to Australia, and they gave me the thumbs up and told me to dump the crutches. And ever since then, I've been pain-free.
Great. Now, as far as the process goes, I mean, you just shared a kind of little bit of experience of those timelines. We also have, at the end of the broadcast, we'll have a package that you can download, anybody at home, and it has a detailed outline of a timeline start to finish of what it would take to, from the day you meet somebody and start talking about it to kind of finish, of where we've estimated times based on your experiences and what we've talked to other people with. So anyone who's watching can get that and have an idea of what the timeline looks like. But it's good to know like similar experiences. So I'm going to turn this over to, I'll ask you, John, and then followed by Sean, because I'd like to ask both of you with who haven't had the osseointegration surgery, in terms of what are your perceived advantages of osseointegration surgery? So you're going from a traditional socket, you have an idea of what the advantages might be, but what are those? What do you think the advantages of going to osseo would be for you?
Well, for me, I think I'll be able to walk well again. I haven't been walking a lot now for the last couple of years because of stump pain, and I just can't seem to get a good fit anymore with the socket. So for me, it's like I'm looking at it for the next 20 years of my life. I still want to do a lot of cycling. I'd like to bike across Europe. I want to walk down to Bruce Trail. I mean, there's a whole lots of things I still want to do. So for me, that's the perceived advantage, and a lot less pain. Wearing the socket for me now has become very painful, very uncomfortable, and it's the same thing. It sweats a lot. I got some pressure points because of wearing the socket on my butt and things like that. I mean, there's a lot of issues when you've had a socket for 25 years. My stump has shrunk a lot. There's a loss of muscle mass. I have osteoporosis in my left femur and my bone, and I understand with OI it helps reverse or even to stop osteoporosis. So I'm seeing that my bone will strengthen, and I'll get muscles again back in my stump. And so for me, it's I want to do it, and we're taking out. I know there's no funding right now, but we've applied for a line of credit on our house to fund this operation because it's 20 years that I'm going to have, at least that I'm going to have my osseointegration. So for me, it's well worth it.
Okay, thanks, John. Yep, go ahead, Peggy.
I think the biggest difference I saw was, and this is going to sound really stupid, my posture. So when I was in a socket, I was on an ischium containment socket, which takes your body dynamics and pushes it all the way to the back. So to counteract that, you stick up your belly and walk and use your back a lot.
So you're referring to loading the IT?
Yes.
Okay.
So with osseointegration, you're back loading into the pelvis, center of your pelvis. So I no longer have back pain. The back pain has disappeared since I had osseointegration. Plus, every morning when you put on that socket, your leg is in a different spot. So your brain has to adjust every morning. Where is that foot today? With osseointegration, it's in exactly the same place it was yesterday. So your risk of falling goes down dramatically.
Sean.
You know, Peg, I find that that's, I mean, there's lots of hardships being an amputee. I think we can all agree upon that, whether it's through funding or the physical aspect of it. But it's the hardest in the morning. It's hard to wake up and think that it's all sunshine and rainbows when you know that you're going to put on a device that is going to cause you pain for the next 10, 12, 16 hours, however long you happen to be out and functioning and trying to carry on. So, I mean, I would have to agree with both, John and Peg here that with John, I'm kind of in the same boat, just 30 years younger. I've been on a socket for a long time. I've accomplished some really cool things, but I've kind of hit a tipping point with my physical anatomy. I'm not I'm a heavier set guy. My weight fluctuates a lot, and I'd like to maintain the integrity of my sound leg as well. I'm only 30 years old and I'm starting to develop knee problems, hip problems, lower back problems, things that people shouldn't have to deal with until they are well into their, 50s, 60s, 70s. And so, I mean, those are the perceived benefits. Plus, like you said, it's living a more sedentary lifestyle, which us amputees naturally do. It takes effects on your health. There's a lot of amputees that they just get worse and worse and worse because they don't have the right alignment, they don't have the right fitment. Things just get they start snowballing essentially. So I'd like to get ahead of the gun and try to look forward into the future and not have to calculate my steps and think about how far I can go or if I can manage this terrain, or when we've been getting crazy hot summers when it's 30, 40 degrees outside and my leg sweats off in literally 15 minutes of me putting it on. It can really deter you from living a happy, active lifestyle. So I think that having the OI should solve most of those problems. At least that's what these guys keep saying.
So I'm just going to jump in here because ask your opinion on that. And I'm all valid. If you can put up picture A for me, please. So from Peggy, what you were describing in terms of posture, for instance, right? So as a process, I'm like for a transfemoral amputee, we're trying to hydrostatically fit you into a socket using soft tissue, loading the pelvis, but we're through the IT, but we're trying to control the femur, the bone, right? So the picture that's up there right now, on the left-hand side, you see the person standing in a traditional socket, and the femur is pointed out laterally, hitting the lateral border of the socket, which is what we face a lot on a daily basis and what we're trying to control. Whereas you look at the picture right beside it, on the right-hand side, and with the osseointegration surgery, the femurs align the same way it would be on the other leg. So what you're describing is what we see in the X-ray, and you're just saying it's a real thing. It changes your feedback, right? In terms of like textures, proprioception, changes muscle imbalances, and all that. So that's what I hear for when you say that those advantages.
You do get osseoperception.
Oh, Mike, sorry.
Oh, sorry. You do get osseoperception, and I use this story. I was grocery shopping and pushing my cart down the aisle, and somebody must have dumped a bag of dog food in the aisle, and the people didn't clean up. So I stepped on a piece of dog kibble. I could feel it right away because the vibration of that dog kibble underneath my shoe radiated right up into my book. I looked down, and there it was. I wouldn't have never felt that with the socket. I would have walked on it and slipped and fall.
Pete, do you agree with all this?
I agree with everything I've heard from the three of them, and in particular what Peggy says about stepping on the dog food. What the osseointegration has taught me, and I've had to learn it. I didn't know it right away, but I've learned to interpret the signals. I can tell my left leg is the one I'm missing. I can tell when my left shoe is undone. Honestly, because the weight and the way it fits on the osseointegrated leg shifts and changes and sends signals to my femur that I've learned to interpret since October. That means, hey, your shoe's undone. Much like Peggy stepping on the dog food, you don't know it right off the bat. You just learn it.
Yep.
And I agree with John and Sean. I was in a socket a lot less time than they were, but I had the same issues. I had skin issues, blisters, sweating. On very hot days, things don't fit properly. And when I put my leg on in the morning, which literally takes me 3 seconds to put my leg on, I put it on with an Allen key, and it's just like Peggy said, it goes in the same spot every time. It lines up every time. I'm aware of where my foot is and what's going on. My biggest problem,
We will have you demonstrate, but not right yet.
my biggest problem with OI is honestly, if I take my leg off to charge it at night and I hop into bed and I wake up in the morning to put my leg on, my biggest issue in the morning is, where did I leave it? Not putting it on, it's actually finding it. Did I leave it by my TV and hop into bed, which I could sleep with it on, but I don't? Or did I leave it beside my bed? And that's a good problem to have. When you're missing your leg, if your biggest problem is, where did I leave it? That's a pretty good problem. There's no pain, there's no issues. It's simply, I'm a scatterbrain. Where did I put this thing? And that's one of the biggest issues I deal with in the morning, is waking up and going, okay, yeah, here it is. I'll put it on. And once it's on, I go.
Now, we've just talked about a lot of advantages, and it's a very positive conversation, and that's great, and I agree. On the flip side, there's disadvantages, and those need to be discussed too, right? So I'm going to flip back to non-osteo patients here, right? John and Sean. I'll start with you, Sean. But looking at the osseointegration surgery, and you've talked about, you really want to do it, but are there any perceived worries or disadvantages that you know you might encounter going through the process?
The only major disadvantages that I'm really worried about are pretty much the touchstone disadvantages would be high impact use. At one point in my life, I was skateboarding and doing a little bit of inline rollerblading, doing some good weightlifting.
I'm just going to inject and say that every time you used to come to get a socket, the first thing you do is go to the picnic table and jump off the picnic table to see if it worked, right?
Exactly.
Yeah, so that's high impact.
That's exactly it.
Right.
Yeah. Like I'll go aggressively up onto a curb or try to step up onto the blocks outside of the prosthetics office. So for me, the whole high impact thing is one of my major concerns. I'm a bigger dude. I fluctuate between 220 and 240 pretty regularly, so I'm already putting a lot of impact through my parts. And then the whole infection thing, that's, I think that's a major problem, having essentially a giant 2-3 inch wide piercing coming out of the bottom of your leg. It requires a lot of maintenance. But I think, ultimately those are things those are disadvantages. We listed way more advantages than disadvantages. So when you create a pros and cons list with something like that, then you kind of got to just go with what makes the most sense. And
but if you pick two, it would be high impact and
high
potential
impact
of infection.
Yeah, exactly.
Right.
Yeah.
So and I'll come back to Peggy and Pete on that one. But John, what about you for disadvantage or perceived worries with having the?
Well, I really don't have any perceived worries, to be honest, because I'm looking, I've got so many issues wearing the socket-based thing. I'm just looking forward to it and going through with it. I've known Peggy now for a few years, and since she's had her surgery, and I've seen what it's done for her. So, all I can say is I'm gung-ho. I want to go ahead with it and do it.
So we have high impact and infection, which I think are both real disadvantages of potential.
Also, interject with public swimming pools are a big no-no as well. But
Good point.
saltwater, if it's a saltwater pool, that's okay. So that's
I have had that question a lot at the clinic, asking about swimming.
So if swimming is a big part of your exercise, that would be a
And
huge
correct me if
risk.
I'm wrong, but the way I understand it is saltwater is great.
Saltwater is
Right.
actually very good for it.
And then public pools, it's not a no. It's just if you're going to do it, you need to be extra diligent with cleaning, and it might not be something you want to do on a regular basis.
Right. So I'm a big kayaker, and I always bring a little Tupperware container of chlorhexidine wash. So if I dump my kayak in greasy, slimy, yucky water, I make sure I go to the shore and wash my leg with a chlorhexidine wash or a salt solution. You could even use contact lens
And
saline
by
solution.
wash your leg, you mean wash the stoma?
Yeah, wash
right?
the stoma.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah.
Just to be clear. Okay.
If I could interject, I just thought of another potential pro. Showering with my leg on. Putting my leg on in the morning and continuing upon my day without obstruction. I think that would be an amazing feat, because as it sits with a socket, you have to take that off if you want to fully clean your body. But
So can I flip that to Pete then?
do you?
And that is coming from a traditional socket to the osseo socket, or osseointegration, sorry, not socket. Has that changed your showering routine?
Yes. Sometimes I shower without my socket on just because that's how I sleep. Sorry, without my leg on,
Yeah.
because that's how I sleep. I don't have a socket anymore. But I can jump in the shower with my leg with the OI, and I've done it a few times. I can go swimming, and like Peggy said, oceans are great. She talks about herself kayaking and the solutions she brings to clean herself. I don't know if I'm lucky or spoiled, but I have had no issues with infection or my stoma, like Sean might be concerned about. And perhaps that's just me, I don't know. And the way I clean myself was every day in the shower, I soap myself up, and there's the first cleaning. And then throughout the day, I spray salt water, literally salt water, boiled water that I add salt to, that they taught me in the hospital, homemade saline solution. And I just get out and I spray my leg down, and it's kept it infection free and everything. It's not a big procedure. It's 2 or 3 seconds with a pump bottle, 2 or 3 times a day. I mean, it's easy to do. As far as swimming goes, yes, public pools are a concern. But like you mentioned, I was told once in a while, and if you get out and give it a quick clean while you're sitting there, it's fine. If a reason you're considering not having OI is because you want to swim, then that's the least of your worries. I would give up swimming for the rest of my life to have this surgery. I don't think I'd give up having a shower the rest of my life because my wife would be upset. But I would definitely, if you told me OI surgery and you can never go in a pool in the Caribbean again, deal, we're done. I would not let that be a concern to you at all.
That's an interesting perspective.
I know some people use their old liners to put over their leg if they're going in questionable water. So that's to alleviate any worries.
Okay, so that's some pros and cons and just discussion from real experiences. So thank you for that. So look at my timeline here. Make sure we're on track. So we've talked about a bunch of pros and cons, but I'd like to open the floor to any stories or personal experiences that you've had. And I'm kind of looking, I guess we've talked about some, but anything else you'd like to add here? So we have just a little bit of time left before we need to go into our question and answer period where we're going to take questions from the audience. So anything anyone would like to add?
I'd just like to add one more thing that is kind of a no-yo, and I'm trying to see if I can go around it, is downhill skiing is another big no-no because of the torquing action of the sport. So if you're considering OI and you're a huge downhill skier like me, you might have to go to a monoski, which is a sit with a ski underneath it, or find something else to put a socket over the osseointegration.
So that is what you've done, right, Peggy? You've
I'm
talked about skiing and how much you
a huge downhill
like to
skier,
enjoy
and
skiing.
I cross country ski on a sit ski, and I'm trying. I did some downhill skiing on a mono ski as well, but there's a huge learning curve for that. So that's another no is downhill skiing because of the torquing.
And that goes back to the high impact.
Yes, the high impact
Sean
and
was-
torquing.
I was just wondering for the people that do have the OI, skiing is kind of a it's a weekend warrior thing. But is there anything in your daily life that you found that there's really no way to get around with having OI that you used to do with the socket?
I think I appreciate the negatives that come with the socket because I went through them too. However, the socket was great for me when I had it. and I didn't know what OI was. And I consider my socket was kind of like a Corvette. You know, it's a good car. You're really happy with that. There's nothing to compare it to until you get into a Ferrari, which is OI. And all of a sudden, things are so much better. It's not that they were bad to begin with. It's that they're so much better. And in my daily life and my experience, like I told you already, I'm a cop. I'm back on full duties. Am I as fast as I used to be? No, but I learned to compensate. Are there some negatives that come with OI? I would have to logically say yes, because that makes sense, but I don't actually know what they are. Because for me, having the surgery, there is nothing I did better on a socket than I do now. Everything I do now is better. And like Peggy said, perhaps skiing is an issue, perhaps swimming is an issue, perhaps infection is an issue. To me, these are very, very small issues in the big picture of getting better. And just to show you, even with a socket, before I had OI, but even with a socket, I've been zip lining all over the Caribbean, I've been kayaking, I've been hiking. Again, I'm not as fast as I used to be, but I don't care. It is what it is. And my wife and I have always talked about when we retire, we're going to go to Europe, we're going to walk around all day. And she's very nice to me. She says, you know what, if you get tired, we'll just stop and drink some wine, which is great because I'll get tired all the time then. But the point is, when I had a socket, I used to be afraid, and I didn't share it with anybody. Oh, I can't go to Europe with Michelle and walk for very long, maybe 20 minutes, and I got to take a break, and I'm sure Sean agrees. But now, having had the osteo, which was only in October, I feel I can walk 99% as far as I used to without stopping. It is fantastic for changing your life.
I just want to jump in for 1 second, then we'll go on, because we're starting to get some questions come in. So I'm going to start directing questions to people here. But I just want to clarify too. Right now, like we're talking to 4 OI candidates. 2 already have it. 2 they're candidates for it. Everyone here, traumatic incident, right? Losing your leg, and everyone's active and healthy. There are people who are going to say, watch this, or be out there who say, wow, I really want osseointegration, and they won't be candidates, right? So we were talking about this a bit earlier, but like, what would you say to, like, we're pumping it up kind of, you're talking very positively of it or the experience of having it, but not everyone's going to be able to have that surgery, right? It's not for everyone. There are reasons why you can't, whether or not it's peripheral vascular disease, smoking, cardiac reasons, right? But what would you say, like, if you had to go back to your socket, for instance, and Peggy and Pete, if you had to go back to your socket, I know, knowing what you know now, you wouldn't want to, but if you had to, is that okay? Like, you talked quite positively of your socket experience, Pete, other than this one is now.
I didn't know my socket wasn't everything I wanted it to be, or it could be, until I had the OI.
But
when I had my socket, it was great.
But you were able to do everything.
Yes, I was able to do everything.
Now.
Now I do it better.
Okay.
If you told me tomorrow the OI has to come out and I have to go back to a socket, I will be severely disappointed. But if it's the only option I have, I'll make it work and I'll adjust. The socket wasn't a prison sentence. It worked. It got me through. Things were good. But I got lucky and I got the OI. Like I said, Corvette is a great car. But when you go to a Ferrari, you realize how much better it is. To go back to a Corvette is fine. It's still a good car. But the OI is the way to go.
Okay, thank you. So Peggy, I have a question for you actually. Someone was asking about how long you can walk with your OI, and I think you'd posted something about your snowshoeing.
This past weekend, our family, for Family Day, went to Ellicottville to go skiing, and because I couldn't go skiing, I decided to do snowshoeing. So I spent 3.5, 4 hours climbing up and down Ellicottville Hill on my snowshoes. So
That's a lot for
I
anybody.
have an app for my Genium.
Yep.
And when I was a socket user, I think I was 4.5 years, I just got to about 1.5 million steps. I'm now 5.5 years, and my phone app says I'm up to over 12 million steps. So look at the increase in activity I've had since the osseointegration.
Great. Another question about the incident, or how many incidents of infection? Have either of you had incidents of infection since your OI surgery? None. So neither. You have mics. Sorry.
I've had none, and I haven't even had anything I've had to speak to you or a doctor about. Like Sean said, yes, it's a 1.65 centimeter inch or diameter piercing, yes, but these things heal over time, and for me it's been 5 months. Yes, I could have problems, but I take care of it, and I have none. It's just, it is what it is. It's something else to live with.
Peggy, you?
Also remember, okay, so we have a stoma, and there's a risk of infection, and a lot of people are very leery of it because it's attached to the bone, so the infection could go into the bone. Yes, that's the true scarcity of this procedure. But also remember, stomas have been used for colostomies for how many years, and it's discharging waste from your body, and if any place is going to get an infection is a colostomy. So if you are good, I'm not a germaphobe. I don't wash my leg and sterilize. I just, every couple weeks, I give it a good chlorhexidine wash and take a shower with regular soap and swish it with fresh water.
I think that's a great point. We're not germaphobes. I do wash it every day. I do spray it with salt water every day, but I would not let the threat of infection stop you from getting this particular surgery. The threat of infection at the stoma on your leg is no different than the threat of infection anywhere else in your body and life, or getting hit by a car or struck by lightning. If it's going to happen, it's going to happen. Don't let it dictate how you're going to live your life until it happens. The benefits are so great, in my opinion, that they far outweigh any of the negatives, and it's worth taking a gamble. It's worth doing it.
So, thank you for your answers. I mean, there'll be someone out there who is very worried about infection, and that might be a big deterrent, but that's why we do this. There's 4 of you here saying you're not worried about it. You're obviously not worried about it, Sean, or John, and
I would be personally worried about it if I was someone that was around a lot of livestock, a lot of manure. That would be a very strong deterrent.
sorry.
That would be a very strong deterrent if I was a farmer or somebody that took care of livestock where you're around poop all day, and so that you have a higher risk.
Okay, I'm going to flip this one to John. Question from the audience, which was, is there any funding available from the Canadian government and ODSP? I know the answer, but I want you to state it.
Right now, there's no funding available from OHIP. They they stopped all the funding for it. So yeah, you've got to, right now you have to try to do it on your own. We're working through our MPP. We have applied for OHIP funding just in case it gets reinstated. And yeah, we're hoping that the government changes their mind. They're saying that this is experimental, OI. I don't think it's experimental anymore. It's proven itself.
I believe they've taken the tag off now, the experimental tag off.
Oh, they have?
Well, I know there are many people out there fighting for it, right?
Right, yes.
And I believe that tag's been taken off now, but that was a holdup for a while, so.
Right. So, I mean, if it comes to it, we'll self-fund it. But I'm hoping that OHIP eventually, if they don't cover it for me, I'm hoping they cover it in the future for anybody else who wants it.
Yeah. So another question was asking about how long does basically how long does it last? I think is how I understand this question. Or how often does the prosthesis need to be replaced? So I'll start by saying I remember from our Osseo night in 2017 when we asked Dr. Almaderas, like about the length of time, and he had referred to it being similar to a hip or a hip replacement, in which I think they're up to about 30 years. And the real answer is we don't know how long it will last because we don't have anybody. I think the first one was in 1995,
Yes,
right?
95.
But we don't have anybody we know who's worn it for that long to have the data on it yet. But the understanding would be 30-year time life would be about accurate if we're going based on the current state of technology with hips. Now, for the parts, and I'd be interested to know if you know of anything from your experience in Australia or Montreal, if they talk to you about any of the replacement of parts or not. I know from the prosthetic side, like the implant we just talked about 30 years, but there are a number of osteo parts that go below it, right? Actually, if you could throw up picture B is a good one, picture B. There's an exploded view, and this came from a picture out of the manual from the Osseointegration group of Australia of all the different parts. And there are parts down there that, for instance, the bushing or the taper sleeve, and the adapter especially, right? That you might go through a bushing because there's a shear pin in there, right? And that's the safety mechanism so that if you torque it too much, the implant doesn't fail. The shear pin breaks and then you put on a new bushing, right? Did they give you any indication of how long those parts, not the bushing, but I mean all the parts are to last?
I
In
think
terms
they
of
told
replacement.
me they don't really know because it hasn't been long enough yet. And I don't know if I'm naive or too simple, but I honestly really don't care. It is so good. I don't care how long it lasts. It's kind of like buying a car. You know it's going to break down at some point, but you need it. You're still going to buy it. And when it breaks down, I'll go to somebody like you, or I'll take my car to Ford and get it fixed. I mean, these are mechanical adaptations to make us better. There's wear and tear on them. And if they break, they break. Somebody's going to fix it. Don't worry about it. It's
And so
not worth worrying
what I
about.
would say about the parts, I mean, prosthetically, if we look at tube clamps and other parts that you're going to need anyways, the warranties on those are typically around the 3-year mark.
Mine's 2.
Oh, 2 for your Mac adapter, right?
Yes.
Yes. Okay. So that's 2-year warranty on it, but we don't know how long it will last. Like we have people, depends on how much activity you have on a part and whatever, right? So you end up with, I don't think there is an answer to how long this is going to last. Things do come with warranties. The Mac adapter, which is the adapter
In the picture?
in the picture at the bottom of the
I
picture.
think the answer is accept that it might break, and so what? You're qualified to fix it. I'll pay you to fix it, and you'll order the parts, and it's fixed. It's life. Things break down all the time. Furnaces, cars, televisions. We need them. We replace them when they break, and we keep going. Worrying about when things are going to break, to me, is not a realistic way to look at OI. You look at it for what it does for you until it breaks, and then you fix it.
There's another question from the audience, which was, is every amputee a candidate for the surgery? Which I think we touched on just a little bit, which was the answer is no, not every amputee is a candidate. Now, if you're interested in finding out if you're a candidate, I'd suggest getting a hold of us. Again, we'll have a link to be able to get a hold of us with a toll-free number and our website, and we can direct you to the people who can then tell you if you are a candidate or not. There are things that can limit you to be not a candidate, but it's worth exploring. Okay, and then, are there any other questions from the audience? One coming? Okay. If anyone wants to add anything right now, I'm just waiting for this. You feel free to, or take a drink.
So does anybody want me to take my leg off?
Actually, that'd be a great idea. So Peggy has offered to demonstrate putting her leg on and off here to show how easy it is. Peggy carries a 4mm Allen key.
On a little rope my father made me.
Yeah, it's on a rope that her father made her.
The 4mm Allen key. So, the
Actually,
adapter
Peggy,
is
can you grab the mic?
Oh, sorry. Yeah, hold the mic for me. So I have shorts under here, so don't worry about it. So the gold rod is what is implanted in me, and this is what you do to don and doff your leg. Unscrew it. It goes to sleep for the night, and this small piece here is where the screw tightens and loosens into the adapter.
This is the point where I sometimes forget where I put my leg. I get into a panic in the morning, but
So that's why I say when you put your leg on every morning, it's in exactly the same spot it was the day before. You don't have to, your brain doesn't have to adjust to where is my leg today. It could, when you line up a liner, it might be out a millimeter at the top, but triangulate that out to the bottom of your shoe, and it could be out a centimeter, 2 centimeters. And when you get up in the morning, your brain has to adjust to it. And where's my leg today? Oh, there it is. And the first couple steps, your brain has to adjust to where your leg is. With this, it's the same place, just like every morning.
I think like Peggy said, it goes on the same way every day, and I assume her leg's the same as mine, but my leg only goes on one way. It makes a clicking sound when it's in the right spot. If I don't hear the clicking sound and feel the slide together,
Yep.
the leg's not on right, so I don't tighten it. So I know every day my foot's facing the same angle, everything is lined up just like she said.
And from the prosthetic side, I agree. Like, it goes on the same way. Once we get the alignment in the right, like the correct alignment, it's there every time. There's no in and out, a little bit of rub, socket issue.
Yep.
Yeah, and it's one worry that I don't have in the back of my head with OI clients. So we only have another minute. There was a question. Oh, Nina, who's a user of OI, agrees that it's fantastic. Nina.
Okay.
And then a question about limitations on limb length. The answer is yes, there will be a limitation on limb length, but that's a surgical question, and I would direct that to one of the osseointegration teams first, because there's some fantastic ways of them attaching the OI implant. I know there is a number. I don't have it off the top of my head, but
I know Pete and I are at the opposite end of the spectrum. I'm very short.
yes.
He's very long. In fact, didn't you have to have some removed
Yeah,
to,
in fact,
to allow?
my femur, I'm above the knee, but my femur was so long that Dr. Turcotte, I believe he had to remove an inch of my femur, which if he didn't tell me, I never would have noticed because of the flesh and the muscle. But to line up my
That's for the
knee,
implant, the dual cone,
Yeah.
so that we have enough componentry to make adjustments and get the knee at the
and
right
everything lines
spot.
up.
Yeah. So limb length wise, I don't think there's any limitation to too long. It's just too short.
Too short.
But I don't know what the
And
the exact
getting any
number is.
removed, I wouldn't worry about, because if the doctor didn't tell me I had some removed after all this and I looked at it, I would have never known he took any off. So it hasn't bothered me at all. And I think the longer you are, the greater advantage you have.
So another question was, is there any other hospitals in Canada doing the surgery? And as of today, to my knowledge, no. There are surgeons, I know in Edmonton, in Ottawa, who have traveled, also gone to Australia. They've trained, they know how to do the surgery. They're angling to do the surgery. But the actual surgeries that happen on Canadian soil have only happened, to my knowledge, in Montreal by Dr. Turcotte, of which Pete was the second one. And I believe that the second part of that was in rehab. As far as rehab goes, what we have experienced down in the Niagara region is that our physios who do our prosthetic training have adapted to the OI quite well, in terms of I don't believe you have to go to a specific place for rehab for OI. Like, if you can go to a place that does rehab with amputees, you can also go with OI. The only thing that changes is the care of your leg and stoma, which the package that we've seen, that we have, and that you both, Pete and you, Peggy, received, is very detailed on how to do that, and you two are doing fantastic with it. I mean, no infections is a good sign that you're doing everything right. We do know there's always a risk, but as we've, I guess, determined, the pros outweigh the risks in everyone's opinion here.
Just about the
another-
rehab, just so you know,
Yeah.
my rehab was so short and complete, October 3rd to November 1st in Montreal, and then I came home to see you and Alan, and I continue my own personal rehab at the Y with my wife, walking on the treadmill, working out, and being just active in my everyday life, and my own personal activities were enough to get me where I am today. Like, if you're into it, rehab's quick, it's easy.
I know when I came back from Australia, I had the 28 days in Australia, and then I came back to Shaver, and I did 3 sessions with the rehab team there, but it was very short.
Okay, I have time for one last question, then we're just going to conclude. And the question was, can other levels of amputation be fit with the OI other than transfemoral? And the answer is yes. They're doing transtibial OI surgeries as well as upper extremity that we know of. I don't know if there are any other than transfemoral happen in Canada, but I know that elsewhere in the world they are doing other levels. So we've run out of time. I'm pretty sure we could sit here and talk for a lot longer because we do like talking about this stuff. So I want to thank the panel for your time and your knowledge on this and sharing it with the interweb. So we thank everyone for watching and coming in to listen to this. If you have any further questions, there's going to be, as I said, a link to us at Niagara Prosthetics, at which we're happy to answer questions as they come in. I see there are some more coming in, but we're just out of time. And they'll show up on the screen shortly, just at the end of the presentation. There'll also be a link to the brochure, which we've set up, which gives a detailed outline of kind of what we know now about osseointegration in Ontario. And it's tailored to Ontario. It's called Step Into the Future, Understand the Osseointegration Journey in Ontario, and the link is there at the end of this. It'll also be on the niagarapo.com website. And actually, we have multiple locations, so it is also on the Barrie P&O website, the Kawartha P&O website, as well as the Owen Sound P&O website. And those locations are all places that we're affiliated with and that are happy to answer questions and take on new clients who are interested in OI. As I said, there's a toll-free number, and other than that, we thank everybody for joining us. We hope that you found this enlightening or enjoyed hearing from people that are actually living it or trying to go through the experience like you might be at home. So again, thank you, John, Peggy, Sean, and Pete, and good night.